Hello there, welcome to another episode of Seeing Clearly with Charlotte Giblin. As you can tell, if you haven't discovered my videos yet, I'm the antidote to all the tech, cut and polish that is around, sharing stories about my life as an artist, stories with universal themes. And today I'm going to talk about ruining your art career, but setting yourself free and finding the balance between the two. So here we have examples of, these are prints because it was such a successful series that most of them, the original, sold. Fantastic, very grateful. These are illustrative drawings that were all done, well, paintings actually, that were all done on A3 watercolor paper. So quite a small size physically. And I started doing these when I moved to Whitianga in the Coromandel Peninsula in New Zealand, here where I live. I'd just been given a new job as an administrator for an arts tour, which was fantastic. And I wanted to integrate into the new location, travel around, meet all the artists, and really feel like I was settling in. I'd only been in New Zealand for a couple of years. I was coming off the back of a huge job as a gallery director in Morrinsville. So this was an opportunity to create some breathing space for myself and learn about a new part of this beautiful country. I'd always had in mind, because I was a really big fan of Tintin and Asterix when I was growing up, and storytelling. You'd never guessed, but I always wanted to write, and finding a way to integrate my art and my writing, this seemed like a perfect opportunity. As I was traveling around the peninsula, I would take photographs and create a diary series, essentially, of where I'd been. And each painting captures a very specific moment for me. I can remember the conversations I had, what cake I had at the cafe. They're very evocative and bring back specific memories for me. Which was the point. They were all done as acrylic paintings, outlines with an acrylic pen, and that graphic style lent itself perfectly to this idea of creating a fun, graphic style cartoon book, a bit like the Tintin stories that I was so inspired by. What I did in each of these paintings is I included myself in all of them, from behind. So it could be anybody, but there's a little Charlotte in all of these paintings. I'm always wearing the same outfit, except for in this series of Coromandel Town, where it was winter and I couldn't really be out in a vest. So I have sensible clothes on, but I actually used the same colours of orange and blue just to show that it was me. And I've always got my little backpack on, carrying all my worries, carrying all my emotional baggage and all my practical items with me. So I created this whole series, absolutely loved doing these. And oh, look at the tech here. You know, I was a potter originally. That was my first job as an artist in the art world. And I just can't get past all the tactile stuff, forget all the fancy tech things. This is about bits of paper and moving things. Anyway, this one here, Tractor on Harhay Beach. This was the most popular print I've ever created. And it just such a lovely story, because for absolutely ages I'd be visiting the beaches around the Coromandel and see all these little tractors with trailers just waiting at the edge of the water, and I had no idea what they were doing. And eventually I found out that people use their tractors to take their boats to the edge of the water, which is quite practical, but really odd if you've never experienced that before. And I grew up next to the coast in the UK, but nobody took their boat to the beach on the back of a tractor. Always integrating trees where I can, the stories of the trees and walking amongst the trees. And here I'm a little bit more obvious. There I've taken my backpack off. And that was quite a significant turning point as well. It was my mum who pointed out that she felt that I was becoming much more relaxed and comfortable being in New Zealand because I'd taken my backpack off in some of the paintings. And the symbolism of that had never really occurred to me, but she was right. Almost like I'd unshouldered the burdens that I was carrying around with me and was very comfortable with being in this new location, because it did take quite a lot of adapting. So this whole series I called Big Skies, and I did about 120 of these paintings, and they got picked up and supported by a local magazine, Coromandel Life, who was so brilliant with their encouragement, and they saw the potential for my storytelling and gave me a road trip section in each of their magazines where I would travel to a different place around the peninsula and document my experiences that day, and then there'd be accompanying paintings which went along with it. And because my whole idea had been to create some kind of diary, an actual book, I did. And it was, again, with the support of the team at Coromandel Life magazine. And I produced this book, which I'm so proud of, absolutely filled with all my paintings and the stories. And it became a really successful item in my catalogue. I'd never had this kind of commercial success before. I suppose I'd never really been a painter. My years as a potter came to an end when I moved to New Zealand, and then I was involved with gallery direction and administration. So this series, which I started in 2012, and I did for 3 years, really was my foray back into painting and integrating that with storytelling. And it was wonderful. It endeared me to the community. I became known as that person with the backpack when I was walking around the towns, and people would drive past me and recognize me from this series of paintings, which is just fantastic. Every artist's dream, right? And that's what I thought too. But then I started to feel quite irritated by them. And each time I would sit down to do a new article or to do a new series of these paintings, I started getting physical reactions, negative physical reactions. And this is something I say repeatedly because it's so valid, that you never have to question anything that only feels good, that only creates a good reaction and response within you. But I've discovered that it can be really helpful to question the negative reactions that come up within us, no matter how small, and to honestly try and explore why you're reacting in that way. Because there's usually some pattern of behavior that can be addressed. It's very sticky and complex as soon as you start looking into those negative reactions, but it can be totally transformative in a positive way, as I found out. But it took a long time. The irritation and the frustration I was starting to feel doing these paintings was at odds with my logical understanding of the success that I was having, because I'd been striving to be an independent, to earn money independently. My partner, he was working really hard, long hours as a chef. I absolutely desperately wanted to bring my own share of money in, feel a little bit less guilty about the amount of time that I was spending doing art and not earning money. And a lot of people were raising eyebrows at me with, well, why do you want to change something which is so successful and bringing in a lot of money? And I think that question has haunted me for most of my life, that tussle, that inner conflict between earning money and creative, personal, heartfelt satisfaction. And I think a lot of artists and creatives are prone to those kinds of questions. I know I'm not alone there. There's a really fine line between, yeah, being satisfied as an artist when you're just creating things for yourself and then selling them. It's important to be able, for me, it's important to be able to sell my paintings. I do them to share the stories. But when I started questioning what I was doing and saying to a few people, they're really starting to frustrate me. And some people didn't understand where that was coming from, because a lot of our Western idea of success is tied to financial success. So what I did was allow myself to start exploring some of the other ideas that I'd had in my mind, which were emerging artistically. And they'd really, the images that I had, the pictures I'd had in my head, had started circulating a couple of years earlier when I was running the gallery. And I had these visions of doing huge self-portraits at really awkward angles, looking up at myself, maybe trying to make myself bigger, more powerful. And I felt that it could be quite a helpful series for other people, maybe feeling like they were trapped or powerless. And oh, the irony that I couldn't see how trapped and powerless I felt, despite all of the wonderful things that were happening in my life at the time. And I decided that if I didn't try and address this increasing physical reaction, negative physical reaction within me, which was starting to agitate me to the degree that I was getting a lot more sore throats, colds, my immune system was being really affected. I was anxious and edgy quite a lot of the time. And these are such happy diary pieces as well. To a lot of people, this doesn't make sense. But what I did was completely change direction briefly. And I'm going to show you what I did, which is behind this easel. So one moment, because I don't do all the flashy tech stuff, I'm just going to move a little bit of furniture so you can just twiddle your thumbs and watch and admire just how incredibly adept I am at shifting things around in my studio. So let's just take this out of the way, and then you can just have a moment to view the piece behind. Oh my goodness me. Yeah. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. So Charlotte emerged. And you see how I've still wearing the same top. And this was the outfit that I dressed my little cartoon Charlotte in all of those Big Skies paintings. And it amused me a lot, but it also was quite a serious point to think, what if somebody had been driving past me with my little backpack and recognized me like many people did? Oh, there's the backpack artist. What if they tapped me on the shoulder and I turned around and they were faced with that? And I know that I'm not the only one who has got used to repressing negative emotion and shoving it back down inside, especially when it's this kind of frustration. And I mean, when I was preparing to do this, a really great friend of mine who's a photographer helped me to get the images. I mean, there's no way I could have held that position or the expression for long enough to actually paint from life using a mirror. And I mean, that in itself was a hilarious process. And I'm balanced up on a ladder, actually in a doorway, because I had such clear pictures of what I wanted. But sometimes what we imagine in our head and picture just cannot, it doesn't work out like that in reality. And we did so many different poses of me emerging, and that was the word that I had in my mind. It was a case of having started to feel so boxed in and trapped in my artistic practice, but also in my, as it turns out, in my personal life, a lot of the restrictions that I put upon myself with my behavior, with the way I was taking responsibility for unduly for everybody else's well-being and forgetting about myself, I think that's relatively common too. But I wanted to show the frustrated, angry, visceral emergence of a different form of myself. Except I thought I was doing this to encourage other people to find the strength to emerge from their box. It genuinely didn't occur to me at the time that this was all about my need to face all of the blocks I put up in front of myself and to take responsibility for removing them if I actually wanted to have any chance of moving forward without carrying all of those emotional burdens. And through the course of hundreds and hundreds of photographs were taken before we could get to this one. And at every time I would try and look angry, and my friend was saying, no, look cute, or oh, you look like you need the toilet. There was nothing. I couldn't get that anger until I actually started. Really, I had to say things out loud, had to allow myself to enunciate some of my anger towards myself, towards the way that I'd felt caged. And also, I mean, I picked the name Emerging, and I did a whole series of these emerging paintings because of the way we also get boxed in as artists in the art world, in the art world, that's the only world I really know. And the idea that I'd been in the arts, I have been in the arts for my entire professional career. I'm nearly 50, top end of the 40s now, and ever since I graduated and started my pottery business, I've worked within the arts. And even though I've swapped disciplines here and there, at what stage do you cease to be an emerging artist? And who decides that? And we have all these labels for emerging, mid-career, and whatever the other one is. And that was frustrating me as well, that I couldn't seem to make any headway in the fine art world. Well, chiefly because I was doing very graphic, cartoony, commercially successful illustrative paintings, which the fine art world had no interest in whatsoever. So this painting completely transformed my career, because everybody who loved my happy, jolly, traveling around New Zealand illustrations was really quite shocked. It shocked a lot of people. In fact, when I was painting it, I can remember my in-laws visiting and sort of tiptoeing around like, "Are you all right, Charlotte?" So, people started to get nervous because this is a side of me nobody had seen before. And I hadn't even really seen it. I'd buried it, completely buried it. And the happy, jolly, friendly storytelling Charlotte was never a fake version, but it was a layer over the top, a very comprehensive layer over the top, which was hiding all of this anger, pent up, irritated frustration waiting to get out. And this is what happened. And it's painted quite badly. This was the first painted portrait I'd done in over 20 years, actually, when I did it in 2015. I hadn't done a painted portrait since I was 18 or 19 at finishing off high school. And I learnt as I was doing it, working from the photographs and trying to colour match, and really, really struggled with understanding, because I'd never been taught this kind of degree of subtlety, even though the tones aren't that subtle, but really had to learn on the job. And what I discovered was the reaction was split into two different camps, really. The first camp were the people who loved what I did previously and suddenly backed off, like, oh my goodness, who is this person? She's having a breakdown, like, step away, wait until she's got over it and gets back to her happy paintings. And there were other people who said to me, I love this, says, I had no idea you could actually paint. And this notion that, and I've talked about this before with realism in a whole video about realism, why is it so popular? This notion that you are only a good artist in a public opinion, generally speaking, of course, if you can recreate something real and recognizable with a technical set of skills. And I didn't mind that people admired the technical skills, and I liked the fact that it pushed a few buttons because I was clearly ready to do that. I was clearly ready to show a different side of myself, except I didn't quite understand the extent of the emotional impact that this was going to have for me. Because I entered it into, the timing, the synchronicity of timing was spectacular. You know, I entered it into the New Zealand National Portrait Awards and it got in. And I, of course, assumed I was going to win. And oh, the folly of ego, which is a constant battle. But it got in, and it was a finalist in this really prestigious show. And a lot of people who operated in the fine art world said to me, this is a big deal, you know, and I had no idea that it was such a big deal. And it toured around New Zealand as part of the traveling show. And I heard from a number of different gallery owners that it divided audiences, that 50% couldn't look at it, walked away. They couldn't face the mirror of what was happening in the painting. And 50% found it fascinating and wanted to share their own stories of frustration and how they got through really difficult situations and circumstances. And it became a real talking point. And I recognize that it's completely unsaleable. You know, my partner and I joke about the fact that it'd be a great burglar deterrent to have it hanging in an entranceway. No one's going to break in with that fearsome creature coming out of the woodwork. But that wasn't the point for me. What I wanted to do, with hindsight to a degree, was to explore this other side of my artistic self. And the painting then triggered a whole series of emotional questions for myself, really uncomfortable questions, where I had to address the fact that there was part of my creative self which was able to tell a truth that my brain and my ego was simply not prepared to admit, that I wasn't happy, that there was this enormous layer of frustration, agitation, irritation, anger underneath the surface. And I knew that if I didn't start addressing those personal issues, understand where they came from, and whether I could actually break the pattern, break the chain of reaction, of holding things in, because clearly this is a knee-jerk reaction to decades, well, not clearly, but it is a knee-jerk reaction to decades of having control, being emotionally present for other people who needed me, being the positive one, the always supportive, and then collapsing, but knowing, I've spoken about this previously, that my inner wellspring of energy would always just ignite and I'd be all right again and back on my feet. But over a long period of time, this was taking a real physical and emotional toll. And she needed to come out and actually tell me this. So looking back, the years where I'd had these images in my head of, huge female figures breaking free, being intimidating, being powerful, and I thought, oh, my purpose here is to show these images to other women, to give them the courage to change or to break away from difficult situations, not realizing at all with any real sense of sincerity that it was me who needed to break free and that I needed to start addressing the process of saving myself and not other people. So that triggered a huge shift in my artwork. When I published the book of the Big Skies paintings, which was 18 months after this, I knew that I was never going to do any of those again. And, I might return to that style, but I've moved on through so many different styles, and the complete collapse commercially of my art business after creating this was worth it. And it made things difficult. There are a lot of other questions about my value, my self-worth as an artist, and about contributing financially into the household. But I kind of held my nerve. And over the years, I've been so grateful that I just took that, I listened to that inner frustration enough. I took it seriously enough to do something about it. And you don't have to paint an angry painting of yourself to address any frustration that you feel inside. This was just my way of doing it. This is how I understand things, as I now discover. These are the messages that I give myself when I don't listen. And it's helped hugely to realize how important it has been, not just for myself, but for the people around me, to allow her to come out, and inspired me to then really look. And it took a few years. The book Seeing Clearly came out in 2022, started writing it 2020 during lockdown. So it took another 5 years of real exploration, internal questioning, probing, difficult questions, difficult realizations, many ego crashes and self-doubt, to actually start emerging out the other side. But you have to start somewhere. I had to start somewhere. And clearly the shift from my illustrative style to this was my pivot point, and absolutely vital as a result. And even though I'm wearing the same vest, slightly different hair, few more years on the clock, really different version of myself. Lasting personal change is absolutely possible. Lasting positive personal change. But you've got to address some really uncomfortable, difficult sides of yourself before you can start on the journey. Yay! Let's do something really difficult and just think long-term about it. Okay. Wow, that was really good to share. I enjoy telling that story. I've told it many times before, still enjoy telling it because it's so important in my life. And hope that some of that has resonated with you, maybe given you some ideas, or made you realize that you're on exactly the right route for yourself, which is just as important. Always good to hold up a mirror and just to check whether what someone else is saying is relevant, and just to check where you are on your own journey. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for being with me for this long. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.